Let's show this unique practical panel now. So we had well, the numbers are shrinking and the sun is still shining. I guess they enjoy more the slopes than the insides. I can understand. Even though we tried to replicate the snow with the white seats and the white panel, it didn't work quite well because it's quite hot sitting up there, as Boris can testify from this morning. Bring back the heat. Please take a seat. Please take a seat. Join us for the practical aspect of developing an improved commercial trade flow across the Caspian region. We had a very high-level perspective this morning. What is required in order to make the digital technologies work, not only in the Caspian region, but also in OECD, non-OECD, and so on. Everybody stresses that regulations are important, too strict not, that there should be a leeway, a leeway of experimentation allowed, but not in a way that transacting parties can be defrauded or led into a direction that is not desired for society. Now we try to elaborate ideas, a platform for global ideas, in the Caspian region, how we can improve and make the trade flow and the commercial trade flow more efficient, less expensive, and more transparent. I would like to welcome our three protagonists here from Kazakhstan. We have Kairat. Please welcome Kairat. He's from Astana International Financial Center. He is a local from Kazakhstan, and very important to be here because we can talk nicely from looking outside inside, which is very difficult to do, but you are inside looking not only what is happening in the region, but looking from inside also outside what is happening. You travel a lot across the world. Your colleague and governor was here this morning. He was talking about how the law is very important, how you structure the law according to the international conventions, that you become connected to the world, which will then enable the implementation of new technologies in the commodity and in financial space. Second, nothing will work if you do not have trust in the system, and audit companies give trust. Audit companies, they provide the tools and the means in order to give trust to transacting parties, without which nobody would pay, nobody would transact goods. Please welcome from Zurich, the PricewaterhouseCoopers representative, Pierre, the head of blockchain. Pierre has been the head of blockchain of Credit Suisse, so he comes from the industrial base, and before he's a serial entrepreneur. He has started companies in India, originally from Switzerland, started in Edinburgh, those Scottish here on the stage, and then went to India and then San Francisco, imbued in the very heart of innovation called the Silicon Valley. You brought back the know-how and then built for Credit Suisse the blockchain division for one of the world's largest banks. Now you take a step into the audit direction and the importance, because without audit, nobody will transact, no smart contract will be implemented, and so on. Then we have Boris back on stage. It is very difficult to find entrepreneurs which implement the practical solutions. And there are a lot of entrepreneurs. There are probably thousands of fintech companies in the world today. It's very lucrative to raise money through ICOs and so on. There's a lot of money being invested in fintech space, billions of dollars. But there are very few who also can show a track record. And from a space which we are talking about in the Caspian region, the number one is commodity and energy and metal trade flow. That most economies, they thrive on that in that region. So it is your life. And as such, I'm really happy to have somebody representing that aspect, what provides your life, meaning the commodity sector, and how you take the technology and your experience and track record and put them into a framework of trust in a space which is the most transparent aspect of the commodity trade. I mentioned this morning, your specialty has been a Glencore metal concentrates. You are from that region. Metal concentrates are metals which have not been entirely refined. You take them from the mines, and they are sometimes a mixture of different metals. Some are extracted, some are not. It is a soup which is intransparent. I take this analogy of the soup and take it to the local aspect of Graubünden. We are here in the canton of Graubünden. In Davos is Graubünden. And the specialty of Graubünden is the Bündner soup. It's called the Gersten soup. The Gersten means barley. And barley is, what do you have in this region 6 months of winter time? It's a poor region in agriculture. So you have to save in summer to survive the winter. And you put this soup, which is a mixture of barley, you had some dried meat, some vegetables inside. When you look at the soup, you see nothing. But there is beauty in the soup, and there is proteins, there are vitamins and so on. So you trade with this soup that you see. You don't know what is inside from outside. This intransparency leads to phenomenal economic opportunities. You can screw the others. Because you say, I'm going to sell you the soup, there is nothing inside, for very cheap, and I'm going to sell it very high because I know there is some meat inside and some barley inside and so on. So basically, Boris is a soup trader, but what he does, he destroys this phenomenal economic opportunity with new fintech by rendering the soup transparent. So having a transparent soup is highly important for the prospering society of that region because it reduces the possibility to screw each other, to defraud each other. It increases the transparency, and transparency in commodity trade, in any trade, is absolutely key to building trust and to deploy the capital and the reduced transaction costs, which eventually will end up for lower cost of goods that you are wearing, that you are eating, that you are driving on. Thank you very much for being here. So we have 3 aspects. A very concrete example from the region, technical aspect, from the policy perspective, and Pierre from, let's say, how can we create the policy, take the policy framework and the actual trading aspects and make it work? How can we stamp that it is a good thing to do and a safe thing to do? I would like to welcome each one of you briefly presenting each other and what you do and how the digital technology enables to increase transparency and efficiency in the sector and in the region. Please, Kairat.
So as this dialogue started with speech of Mr. Kellenbetov, our governor, he described a little bit what we are doing, what our financial center is. So shortly, it's a new jurisdiction in Central Asia and CIS countries, which is based on English common law, which is very important. And we also created a separate and independent regulator for like financial services, fintech, etc. And independent and separate judgment system based on English common law. So I think this is a basis allowing us to create something, the jurisdiction ecosystem to digitalize all these assets, resources, and provide business new financial services, allowing and enabling make international trading very easy, very clear and understandable. So we are now we are launched just in January, and we have already many requests to register in our jurisdiction, including digital banks, some companies providing financial services, companies which is going to digitalize or tokenize some assets, and we are inviting some exchanges on which these assets can be traded. So, and I think that we can become a center where all these trades, international trade, will take place.
So on a practical side, now this is phenomenal. So you provide a center for different asset classes, old and new, or existing and new, old is the wrong word, but existing and new ones, to be effectively, transparently, and speedily traded, settled, and transacted. That's correct. And you create a registrar, basically, based on maybe talking about concrete things. With whom do you collaborate? And it's very complex topics also technically. Do you collaborate with companies? With which companies? What kind of practical solutions do you draw in order to make that all a reality?
Yeah, generally in financial sphere, so we develop we are aims to develop capital markets, and we created a traditional stock exchange, which in partnership with NASDAQ and Shanghai Stock Exchange. So, but it's more traditional stock exchange with traditional finance and services. But in terms of tokenizing and digitalizing assets and trading them, we are going to partner or just to allow business from startups, from companies which is developing and creating such projects. So they are welcome, and we are ready to host them, to develop regulatory for them. We are using sandbox approach, which means that if we don't have regulatory for now, we can develop it for any particular project to allow them realize this, like I think, ambitious projects in our region.
So you mentioned that on one hand you collaborate with the leading exchanges in order to from Shanghai, from the east, and NASDAQ from the west, which provide you the know-how how to set up all these systems. On the other hand, you reach out to the industrial base from new companies, but probably also bigger ones, existing ones, that provide you with the technological tools in order to implement what you try to do. And which companies do you collaborate? Is this a public information?
I can't say now because we've just launched, and so it's like negotiating ongoing projects. But I can say that it's like for our region, it could be a subsidiary of big foreign platforms or newborn platforms from owners of existing platforms. So they just trying to launch the new project, but they have already traction and the experience in building such
like, do you have an example? Is it Microsoft? Is it Google? Is it Consensus? What kind of companies?
We are collaborating with Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, etc. We are negotiating with Alibaba. So, and it's different projects with every this like big name. And our traditional exchange is with NASDAQ because they have new technology and ready to experiment. From the other side, Shanghai Stock Exchange is aiming to bring liquidity to the stock exchange, which is very much important too.
And you are at the center between East and West. You are at the node of the traditional Silk Road, a string of pearls which connected all the stands from China all the way to Europe, which is really the artery, the life artery, both ways. And the new mantra is not the Silk Road; it's called One Belt, One Road, which you are now actively. And this is a very practical and a functionable implementation of that strategy, be it from China, but also from the European side. This is a very good example. Thank you. You mentioned big names. These are all leading names, Microsoft, Alibaba, IBM, and so on. Do you also collaborate with smaller and younger technology companies?
Sure. First of all, we are trying to create conditions to attract new startups in fintechs and trading sphere. That's why we are using sandbox approach. We are launched sandbox, and so if anybody here is making startups and going to work in our region and then go worldwide, for example, so you are welcome. We are ready to host.
So you are welcome. I mean, you talk about finance, you talk about markets, you talk about startups. That thing has to be paid. You need to attract investors. Are there investors willing or able and ready to deploy capital in the regional new startup scene?
Yeah, now we are, first of all, we are trying to build an ecosystem based on legal issues, regulatory and so on. Then we are working on creating ecosystem which will help startups to develop their project, like incubation acceleration programs, which is connected with big worldwide acceleration programs in USA, Europe, and Asia. Third one is, of course, we are negotiating with venture funds, which is ready. Some of them are ready to be represented in our center. Some of them ready to consider our startups to invest. So I think it's a big help for startups, and we will work on whole ecosystem, not only like legal side.
So the whole ecosystem from the legal, industrial, and financial side, you reach out to the leading corporations. I hear mostly Western names here. I hear both ways from the market and regulatory sides. Now we talk about the Caspian region. So how do you approach the regional approach? How you deal with Turkmenistan, with Russia, with Azerbaijan, Iran, with Georgia? Is there any form of dialogue going on that could connect all those countries and make the One Belt, One Road a reality?
I could say that our region is a priority for us, because in terms of like developing fintech, I don't think Kazakhstan have enough, like for example, software developers. We are going to attract them from Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and so on. And we're just trying to create very comfortable conditions to attract them, to attract to Astana. And we even don't require to be presented all the time in Astana. You don't have an office. You just like come time to time and work. And we are trying to attract them to be presented, but it's not necessary.
So an open platform which is flexible to accommodate all players. Exactly. And all from different jurisdictions. Yeah,
our aim is like to build an ecosystem, because we are trying to be a center of competence in developing of fintech projects and finance services at all in our region.
One last question I come to next. You mentioned a center of competence in the regional player. Do you know of the other countries having similar plans or activities going on?
Sure. For example, in Belarus announced that they are going to be friendly to crypto projects, which is very good signal for another jurisdictions. And so we are welcome this, because you know this, when your neighbor successing, it's good for you. For you, because you know to whom to collaborate. You know.
But Belarus is quite far away from Kazakhstan, though.
Not so way. So here in Europe, you think that everything should be like very much close. But between Astana and Almaty, or between St. Petersburg or Moscow, it's more than 1,000 kilometers.
Yeah, but it's still much further than, let's say, Turkmenistan or Russia or
it's
Iran
not so
or
far.
Azerbaijan.
It's a couple hours by plane.
Okay, I ask a different question. But how do you collaborate with your real neighbors?
So Russia is our real neighbor.
Yeah, no, Belarus. So Russia.
Russia, okay. Kyrgyzstan, China. It's huge interest from these countries.
And how about Turkmenistan?
Turkmenistan are interesting, but not too much. But we will work on it.
How about Iran?
Iran. So I don't think so. Maybe we will.
Probably not. Okay, Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan, yes, exactly. Azerbaijan is very interested.
How about Georgia?
Yesterday I met one guy from Georgia Stock Exchange, and he was very much interested, and I think they will be interested in liquidity which we can bring from China.
Coming back to this Caspian aspect, what you try to do is increase the commercial flow around the Caspian region. Do you see a future where you would potentially start to collaborate with Iran, with Turkmenistan, and so on, through new digital technologies?
Exactly. I think that way of digitalization of assets and tokenization, etc., and building new exchanges with trade exchanges with new approach. It's like a way of allowing this trade and settlement like in region and worldwide. So worldwide is a problem of shipping, but I think that it's became there are a lot of solutions of shippings and. But now it's more about trading, servicing in terms of financial services, banking and payment system, etc. So if we can make these problems like less than it is now, I think it will force current trade to a new level.
Thank you so much, Kai. That was a very extensive introduction.
Thank you very much.
I think it was very important because you came all the way and you represent one of the largest, the second largest next to Russia, country. Depending how you look at the Iranian, will probably disagree. But I think now for our purpose, it is the second largest because Iran trades mostly through the south, while you trade more east and west. So there's a big difference in that.
We will be glad to trade with them.
Now from an audit, all these things will not work if you do not get the certificate of approval for the trades, for the system, for anything around that. Pricewaterhouse, together with KPMG and others, are absolutely essential in that process to provide the trust for the parties. Now, to increase the trust, we have the thing called blockchain. And Pierre, as a head of blockchain, so you up the ante in terms of trust building by building blockchains in various aspects in the commercial trade flow. How does the blockchain create the opportunity to increase that trust between the countries? We just heard there is a lot of collaboration in international countries. There is not so much going on yet between their immediate neighbors. What could be the opportunity to apply the blockchain technology and where you could give the approval of trust in order to them to transact?
I think it's a great question. Thank you very much. First things first, I'm not really from the audit background. I work for an audit firm, that's correct. But I'm coming from the technology background. So thank you for turning the question around the blockchain technology rather than the actual audit. I think, nevertheless, they're complementary. I think in order to trade, most people need to trust their counterparty. And either we go through the old route, which is having intermediaries provide that trust, or there's a new route today, which is enabled by blockchain and by smart contracts. I just like to debunk something about smart contracts because I hear it kind of as a holy grail and blockchains is delivering smart contracts. Smart contracts have always been there. Smart contracts basically come from the laws of physics. It's when an event happens, something else when an event is triggered, something else will happen. So you kind of have smart contracts all around you. When you put wood under the water, it will float back up. And if you drop someone from a plane, he'll fall. The real new novelty of smart contracts, apart from the fact that it's digital, because you could implement scripts in the past and they would execute flows automatically. So the real new novelty of smart contracts with blockchain is that you don't need to trust any intermediary. It's a trustless transaction. You agree on a protocol and the protocol will self-execute. Another thing I'd like to kind of debunk is the whole tokenization. I think there's big hype about tokenization around blockchain. Tokenization has been there forever. Currencies have been initially tokenized. There used to be the gold standard. Certificates, when you trade a good in both your respective sectors, is a form of a token. And the most obvious token that everyone understands is the casino token. You go in, you have underlying fiat value, and then when you get out of that ecosystem, you cash your token out. So tokens are not something new. I think, once again, what's really new is that those tokens can be traded without any trusted intermediary. There's no one that needs to be trusted to issue them. And that's where the real novelty comes from. So coming back to the Caspian region, I think Georgia has set a very good example by wanting to experiment with blockchain and land titles. They've been one of the first countries in the world to actually try to tokenize their land titles on the blockchain. To my knowledge, it's leveraging the security of the Bitcoin blockchain, which is today by far, by many, many folds, the most secure blockchain out there. And I think when we talk about blockchain, we have to think what we are prioritizing. Are we prioritizing flexibility for business logic and business processes? Are we prioritizing security? And then we can decide what kind of a blockchain we want. We hear a lot of people speak about blockchains that are centralized. that is no more a blockchain, even though they might be blocks that are chained. In most cases, they aren't. This tends to be just a hype word that's used by everyone building technology today to try to capture this market that's emerging. So China typically is working on a national cryptocurrency. I'm not saying it isn't a blockchain, but most likely it's not going to be a blockchain. It's going to be centralized. It's going to have every transaction is going to probably, and I'm speculating here, but it's probably going to go through some kind of central control and approval. And so we have to be very, very careful when we hear all those buzzwords. Future economy is going to be tokenized and everything is going to be transacted on a blockchain. Blockchains have limitations. There's throughput limitations on a blockchain. If we're speaking about a real blockchain, it's supposed to be decentralized, and you cannot have an agreement on the state of the ledger every fraction of a second in the way you can do it with a centralized blockchain. A centralized database. So we have to understand what those technologies bring to the market before we try applying them to everything, because this is a rare case where we have a technology and we're looking for a business use case, and it's not the other way around, where there's a business problem and we're looking to solve it with a technology. So I think that was too long, and
that's okay. That's okay. There's a lot. The blockchain it never stops. It changes, goes on and on and on. So you stress that thanks to blockchain, thanks to tokenization, we do not need trust between party A and party B to transact. Mm-hmm. Is this correct?
I claim that it can remove some of the trust required in business transactions.
Some of the trust is already much lower than no trust.
Absolutely. Okay. So some transactions can be trustless. Others will always require some trust. And that's where auditors can come in. Like, if I start certifying that you got a Harvard degree, even though you never went to Harvard, I do not have that authority. And so on a public ledger that everyone can audit, you can identify some parties, and they can become certification authorities. And you can have an institution like Harvard, who now uses the blockchain to certify that their individuals, their alumni, have graduated from the university. But once again, it comes down to trusting the certificate authority on the blockchain. But now no one needs to trust me when I say I have a blockchain, have a Harvard certificate. I can prove it on the blockchain. So that's why I'm saying it removes some of the trust, not all the trust. Some transactions can be trustless. We just have to know where we're applying it.
So this panel is about being practical. Caspian region, countries that some talk to each other, some don't talk too much with each other, and so on. We have a lot of commodities being traded left and right, up and down. So here you come, you have the tools in your hand. I can provide the trust, and if there is a doubt in the trust, I come as an auditor and fill the gap. How could you practically implement that strategy in the Caspian region?
So first of all, I think it comes through a central issuance of an openness to do business. I think there's a lot of countries that claim that they are open to business, and once you get into that country, you realize that the rules are very strict and there's not much space for creativity. I think if you want to be a flourishing hub, you need to enable creativity. And I see some jurisdictions around the world that say, for instance, that we're not going to promote Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever token on a blockchain, but we will allow, and we do today allow everyone to trade those tokens at their own risk. And so that gives a lot of comfort for an entrepreneur to actually move to the region that promotes clear standings. Right now, I think uncertainty is the enemy of business and innovation. And I think we need to provide more support, and by that I mean guidance, to the people that are willing to come and provide brain power and business and flows of money.
So break down those walls.
break down the walls. Yes, fully. And so I think we live, on one planet. I consider myself a global citizen, and one thing that I'd like to stress is that what's happening with blockchain right now, I think a lot of people are missing the point because they're all speaking about how they're going to regulate it. First of all, the regulators don't understand what they want to regulate in most cases. But secondly, we're speaking about a new jurisdiction that's cyberspace. And a lot of transactions can only happen digitally. Some will have an impact in physical jurisdictions, and then local law will apply. But when I stream a video, I'm staying in cyberspace. And I can stream my video using some kind of crypto token or without going into the weeds, some crypto token. And right there, I have not actually interacted with any physical jurisdiction apart from my presence being in, right now, Switzerland. So I think we need to understand that in this new jurisdiction that's being built thanks to blockchains, there's a new law that's being built by everyone who actually writes code and who has their code approved. And in this jurisdiction, because it's machines speaking to machines, wherever they are around the world, there's no borders in cyberspace, code is law. And I think that's something that needs to be understood. And when we're speaking about transactions happening in cyberspace without interacting with a physical jurisdiction, the code will be the law, and if you don't write code, well, you're not going to regulate it. You will regulate your physical jurisdiction, and you can prevent a lot of things happening from your jurisdiction in the cyberspace. But you cannot prevent cyberspace from not obeying your jurisdiction's law, unless you lock it down like China's trying to.
Code is the law. In cyberspace.
In cyberspace.
So now let's get to the soup business. So Boris, as the cook, has been used to cook on a fuel burner, and now he moved into the microwave space. So he takes the electricity. And to disassemble this entanglement of the various ingredients, and based on blockchain technology and others, how are you going to achieve that?
Well, first of all, Casper, thank you very much for putting together this event, and I want to thank the audience on Friday afternoon. After such a busy week, it's an accomplishment to be here. So we really appreciate you guys, and especially I know Trump is speaking at 2 p.m. and he's a very entertaining speaker. So it's a testament to Casper and the effort of the whole team of the Caspian Week. In terms of what we are trying to do in a couple of words. We are coming from the physical commodity trading background, and what we are doing, we are disrupting a lot of things that have existed in the industry for centuries, and we digitize them. So you can think about us as online marketplace, something like Alibaba or eBay for certain type of the commodities. In terms of how blockchain and smart contracts, which at this point are not that smart, but how they will change the world, we all understand that the less intermediaries you involve, the more efficient the process becomes. And that's the whole premise of the blockchain in our space, and it will disrupt over the time. The interesting part, what is actually quite amazing, is I'm actually tired of hearing the word blockchain. I think during this week, I have heard it more than in my whole entire life before that. Literally, every single panel always mentioned blockchain and how it will change the whole world. And then you figure out, the papers were published in 2008, right? Almost 10 years passed by, very few real applications that came up, right? Conceptual makes perfect sense. Almost everybody will agree it's amazing, right? And the question is, how do you get the real results out of there? And for us,
I just want this very interesting. Was 2008? It goes even further back. The head of research Microsoft sent me once a mail 1 year ago. What's the big deal with this blockchain? The head of research Microsoft, they said, the thing is, as the whole goes back into the 80s. Here's the things: distribute the computing power, which they try to node together, and so on. So it's interesting what to say. You hear from the biggest company, he was really, what is the big deal?
And so the question is, why it did not pick up in the 80s, right? Basically, all it is just algorithmic way to protect and secure the data. on the public ledger. That's it. So there is really, literally nothing new. There were divisions in computer science that were doing that for a long time, but something happened, right? The critical mass was reached when a significant percentage of the people got united and says we can actually try to create something out of this. And I think that's the progress that is happening, right? And you can clearly see how our world is changing. Think about that. The government of Central Asia is saying, how can we be competitive in order for somebody to come to us? This is a great change in the mindset, right? Instead of you coming trying to persuade the government and says, please allow me certain things, the government start thinking, that's it, there are no more borders, right? We are all competing. We are capable of being part of the future. And I think that's a testament of how we are reaching the critical mass, and I think that's what changed.
I'm very proud to have actually, 2/3 presented on the panel from the Caspian region, which is very difficult to achieve. There are 3, and 2 out of 3, it's a big number in a percentage-wise. So thank you very much for coming. So practically, for the Caspian region, how do you personally apply with your company the new technologies in order to break down these commercial walls and create more transparency, more efficiency in the system? And with whom do you collaborate in order to implement those new technologies?
Very simple, guys. We are working with very large businesses, right? So think about that. What is the average mine or smelter? Thousands, tens of thousands of employees, very bureaucratic, huge hierarchy, right? Almost nobody can get through. They have a couple of the partners they've been dealing for a long time, and they will not allow nobody else to come in for a very simple reason. Anybody who is the small part of that chain, he's absolutely risk averse. Anything goes wrong, it's his career on the line, he's getting thrown out instantaneously, right? And if the company gets the benefit, it's the company that gets the benefit, right? So in his situation, it makes no sense to make any kind of effort, right? And so what do? You actually have to bring something new. You have to demonstrate to them the potential to earn more money and move into the next generation, simplify things, make things easier and more efficient. And that's what gets people, right? You have to be practical. So when you come to them, you cannot just say, we have an amazing blockchain concept that will change the whole world. You have to say, hey guys, this is the document. We have partners that digitize it well, and that allows to get the title of the commodity when it arrives without sending all the documents around. So you decrease the time around, you increase the efficiency, make it transparent, you come to the CEO and says, you're afraid about your commercial people making decisions on the ground, reflecting maybe company's interests, maybe their own. This is your chance to be on the marketplace at any moment and transparently see what is happening on the global arena. What are the best offers that you can get today? And that's it. That's what the transparency does.
That's it in a very simple terms for the world's largest businesses. Let's make a concrete example. You have a mine in Kazakhstan. Sure. How much of the GDP is derived from metal mining?
I don't know exact the percentage, but obviously Kazakhstan.
Percent. And from energy? Much more. How much? About 50, 60. So about 70 overall are derived from commodities. Okay, you take stuff out of the ground, you put it on a truck or a train or a ship, you take it to a smelter, you extract and refine the products, you put it on other transport modes, you take it somewhere into a fabrication, further refining processes, or integration into products that we sit on, we consume, we talk on, and so on. Without all that stuff, we would not be here. It's very important to understand for the audience. We might reject realities and say, this is dirty business, this is in crazy locations. We might deem it as shady businesses, but without those, nobody would be here and so comfortably living as we do today. We forget that. 50% of the global trade is energy in dollar terms. 70 overall, this 20% is metals, primarily on some soft commodities. Soft commodities are more locally traded, not globally traded. Globally traded is energy and metals by far, iron ore and so on. And Kazakhstan is right at the heart, is one of the largest producers of metals besides energy. It is 70% of the GDP, is absolutely essential. Even more so in Turkmenistan, it's more on energy side. Azerbaijan is energy side. Russia is a more mixture, it's also agricultural goods and so on. So this is the Caspian region. We have to be very clear that this is the very heart and the sense of life in the region. It's also very essence of life in Europe. most energy in the eastern part of Europe is derived from gas, which derives from that region. And so it is also going into China. So you are at the very center of supplying this warm room here that we can be sitting, even though we have a door open at 0 degrees outside. Without those and this cheap and reliable energy supply, we would not be here. It's very important to understand. So I would like to make a very practical example how that works. I take stuff out of the ground, I put it in a truck, I refine it locally or internationally, another one into ships, I take it to a manufacturing company, put it in products that we profit all from. You are in the middle. You trade and transact. You provide the means of transaction and the regulatory framework, while Pierre, you the tools that enable to fill the gap where the system, the digital system, fails to create the trust for the transacting parties. Boris, please showcase one practical example. I take out X tons of X, put it on a truck and pay X. Why?
Sure, very simple.
Why your technology is better on providing that? We do this for 200 years.
Why is it better? What happens today? You have the trader who knows a lot of local markets around the world, right? He buys from somewhere cheap and tries to sell it a bit more expensive in another market. What does he do? He does it by hand, right? He picks up the phone and he calls the guys that he knows at multiple jurisdictions offering the product. What do? You just allow the market to do that job. You put it up for online global bid from around the world. The people who are capable of subtracting the most value from that product. Let the market regulate. Is that going to get the better bid than one trader? Absolutely, especially because you can also invite that trader to that auction as well. If he happens to be the most efficient, this time he'll win it. What percentage will be that trader? Probably quite small if you do it on a global basis. The way it would work with Kazakhstan, Soviet Union has built up a lot of vertically integrated enterprises. So they mine, they smelt on their own, right? In the reality, a lot of things have changed in this world. China has built up gigantic capacities on the smelting side. And so today, a lot of people all around former Soviet Union, including Kazakhstan, Russia, extract tremendous amount of minerals that they then put to their own smelters. Built up in the 60s, frequently the ore has changed since then. A lot of things change in this world. They're not the most efficient. So instead of destroying the value, they can just put it on the truck or on the rail, which would be more common in that type of region, and send it to China that does it extremely cheaply and efficiently.
Yes, Kara, please.
Yeah, I don't know why, but you are talking more about trading. But I think that these technologies can be implemented in different markets. For example, junior mining trading. Have you heard about it? Like it's some investors, preliminary investors, owns mining fields, for example, in Kazakhstan, and want to attract investors. So they need investments to develop this field, and it's kind of risky investments, and it's very hard to attract it from like private market, and you are not ready to go to IPO, for example, for now. Here comes junior mining platforms, junior mining trading exchanges, where you can just go and attract these investments, which is more risky, but potentially has a bigger upside. Such exchange is successfully works at Canada, Toronto. We've met with these guys, and its government very much supports such initiatives because it allows people participate in these investment opportunities, and from other side, these businessmen is working with these fields are able to attract investments with a more easy way. Yes, it's more risky, but if you make it more transparent, which blockchain allows to do, for example, and more understandable rules, so it will work. And we are going to implement the same with user experience of Canadian colleagues to implement in Kazakhstan. And it could be a place for whole region, not only in Kazakhstan. for whole region.
Thank you very much. It's a very important. I talked a little bit about the trade flow because the commercial flow across the 7 regions. While if you raise capital, it's more on a per country region. Usually, if you are a junior, you're either in Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, active to start with. Of course, the Glencores are active in all countries, but not so for a junior mine. Junior mining means it's basically a young company that has no money, but they have gained some sort of title to explore or some sort of a plant where they can process something, but they don't have the money. So they have to sell equity or issue a bond in order to attract capital. And you're building a platform not only to raise capital for transactions, which is a debt-based system, so you increase trade credit, but you also increase a platform even more so to raise capital for companies.
Exactly.
So selling equities or raising through bonds, bond structure, even addressing different belief system like the Sharia-conform, sukuk-based, non-sukuk-based
Islamic
systems.
finance is one of our
Islamic
priorities.
finance and so on. But you connect. You mentioned Toronto. That's absolutely true. I mean, Toronto is the world leader for mining companies of raising capital. It is not the leader in transaction business. This is Switzerland. But in raising capital, it is Toronto and actually London.
But transaction business is good too. So.
Yeah, exactly. But you address both issues, and this is a very important point. Coming back to Kazakhstan, because obviously here we have a proponent of breaking down those walls through cyberspace law, which is difficult or not be able to regulate on a national sovereign basis. You obviously represent the policies of a country, and you would like to attract the money to your country. Now, I might be on a different country, say, hey, come to me. I'm your neighboring country. So how do you address that issue? Everybody seems to be willing to building up like their own financial centers in the region.
That's okay. So sure, we are now watching we can see a big competence between countries, between jurisdictions, and that's good. I think that development of jurisdiction, development of rules, which governments are negotiating with like participants, it's good for business, because these rules became more like flexible and more reliable for business. And from the other side, protecting consumer rights, right? So this whole is about like protecting consumer rights and letting business run like in different countries. In terms of regulations of blockchain, as you told, that it's hard to control this, but from the other side, there should be like entrance to this blockchain from fiat money, and like exit from crypto assets, right? So I think the most important is like it's very easy to track, for example, crypto assets inside this blockchain, because it's tracking everything, right? So from technical side of view.
Depends which blockchain you
okay,
use,
but most.
And depends what kind of transaction you do on a blockchain and so on. But I think
it's more like technical diving. But in reality, two more points is like entering and exit. And I think government have to like control these 2 points. And here it goes then AML, KYC approaches, and source of funds, etc. That's important, because this like technology should work for people, but not against like systems. So that's our point.
I agree with what you're saying. I think governments can definitely have an impact on what's happening in cyberspace. They can delay it. I don't think they can stop it.
Exactly.
I can still.
Electricity. That's it.
But to come back on a few things that have been said on the topic, I think the fact that there are several hubs that are emerging in the area. We've seen that happen in the Middle East prior to the Caspian region. I think it's good to have competition. Competition has always provided more value to the consumer. So ultimately, long live competition, and please compete in every jurisdiction. I think that's one of the reasons why Switzerland is such a strong country today, is because we allow each canton to compete with one another. So coming back to that point, I think that's a good thing that there are various hubs. Other thing that I want to say, as we've been focusing a lot on trade, one of the things, to my understanding, I've got bigger experts around me, but one of the problems with trade is actually to be checking quality and volumes. No one cares about transparency if you get the right quality and the right volume. So I don't think transparency should be the goal, but because some companies might not want to provide that kind of transparency. What we need, and sorry for the bad joke, but it's auditability of quality and volumes. And I think that can be done by building kind of new technologies or leveraging existing technologies around the sensors, sensor world, maybe new types of seals on the containers or on the pipelines or whatever is used to transport those goods. And the blockchain is only a transactional layer. The blockchain will not provide better products if it's all broken throughout. So I think we have to focus on, blockchain is one solution for the transaction part, but we need to focus on the technologies that will actually provide more auditability of the goods in terms of volume and quality. And that's something that a region like the Caspian region could focus on, building that kind of electronics or that kind of, tamper-proof seals to make sure that their goods are getting delivered and it hasn't been tampered throughout the supply chain.
Boris, from a practical side, you're the entrepreneurs, you deploy your own money into providing or finding new solutions. We talked a lot about opportunities. Where are the challenges to deploy your technology in your activities in the region?
The challenges are actually all the same all around the world, so there is nothing special about Caspian region. It actually shares identical problems to all emerging markets and actually most of the developed markets as well. Just developed markets tend to have a better PR behind them. The biggest issues in the trade business are two. It's supply chain and the trade financing. And that's the two areas that could be addressed. And there is a ShipNext company, which is present here. I was promised an alcohol drink if I mention their name from the stage. For example, what they do, they have now trying to disrupt the supply chain on the shipping side. When you ship it by bulk, it's a very inefficient market. The brokers tend to dominate there. There is not transparent quotes. So they have taken a part of that supply chain, only the ships, right? And now they're providing the quotes straight on the platform, right? And we all understand that's where the future is. And what they do, for example, they put up a first smart contract. Of course, it's the most basic, right? You're just digitizing one document, put it on the smart contract. If this is what is happening, you get some result, if-else statement. But that adds already a tangible value and the benefits.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the first time. I would like to open up the floor for some questions to the panel. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your thoughts and presentations. I would like to a little bit perhaps go into the, let's call it conspiracy part of that theory. As far as I understood, read a lot of materials, a lot of press, cyber, echo, etc. was created perhaps long even before 1980s. It was maybe 1950s, 1960s. Even talking about, let's say, when first people went to the space, how they were communicating. At the time, the popular way of communication was a cable telephone. So you had to have cables around to be able to call to someone. But already, people were communicating with astronauts who were far in space directly. They didn't have cables.
So what is the question?
So question is to me, no, it's a bit long. I would like to touch.
No questions. They are one, maximum two phrases, and then with the question mark. The panel is here to answer that.
Okay. Don't you think cyber was given back to people or released by the states because states globally cannot produce cash money anymore.
What is the question?
The question is this, don't you think?
Sure. I'll actually respond. Very simple. The governments can produce as much cash as they want to. It's not supported by absolutely anything. It's a pure fiat, right? Absolutely pure. They don't even have to print there. You know, they can just deposit that on the account of the financial institutions who are close to them, if not controlling them, right? And so you don't need to make any kind of conspiracy theories, guys. You know, we all understand this world. You know, the trust in the government has decreased to absolutely nothing. What is happening in the crypto space? Whatever way it has been developed, almost like every other technology, I started my career in the defense sector in the United States. Almost every single one big development came from the defense industry, okay? So this is quite a common thing. Internet did as well. The beauty with the internet, and particularly, it's decentralized. This is the beauty of blockchain. There is no really anybody behind there. And all the code, if you are going with the public ledger, is visible. Okay, so you can actually inspect every single element. What is the beauty of Ethereum? You can actually see what is happening there, right? So it's very hard to hijack that system. It's possible, but it's very, very technically challenging to do so. So in the world of the, if you look, take a dark view on a lot of things being around us controlled by the government, this is actually one place which is one of the least, if not the least controlled. And it's very, very challenging for the government to really control that.
Thank you very much. Please.
Just to bounce back, I agree. Governments can print as much as they want. The more they print, the more they will lose trust over time. They need to find the right balance. The reason why they print is to guarantee some kind of purchasing power within their citizens. If their citizens are not happy with the way they print, over time, the trust erodes and they lose some of the control that they had through that kind of print. And we've seen that in many countries. I mean, possibly Kazakhstan. So I think it's not about who can print the money, it's about how do you broker trust and how can you exchange something that's trusted by the community of people who transact it.
Okay, thank you. Maybe this focus is really about practical solution in the Caspian region. Please formulate the question accordingly, not about general philosophy of economics, of monetary policies and whatsoever. Practical questions about practical solutions for the Caspian region, please.
Okay, so I'm Maciej Żukowski from CoinFirm. We are provider the anti-money laundering for blockchains. And my question, the practical question for the region, do you think the governments in the region may want people to register their cryptocurrencies addresses like we do passports today, like issued from the government, or they will allow private companies like mine to do the anti-money laundering and KYC checks?
Very practical question, very practical for the region. Kairat.
I don't know what will be in future, but now I think it's impossible to make all people register all their crypto like wallets or addresses or whatever. But anti-money laundering, KYC procedures is very important. I think it's like one of key elements, and it's growing business now. And so if you are interested, you are welcome to AFC. We can negotiate of your participation.
Wonderful. Yes, please. Timo from Kazakhstan. And basically, Timo is really interesting because he can relate to both worlds. Timo grew up in Switzerland, studied in Switzerland, speaks better Swiss German than I do. I don't know how you managed to do that, but everybody have a very excellent post-formation education in Kazakhstan. I live now in Astana. Please.
Thank you, Kaspar. So my question is addressed to Boris. I would like to ask you, because you are from the commodity trade business and now entering, I mean, following the hype or the future, following the topic that is actually currently this week in Davos, one of the most, I mean, promising, one of the, I mean, the blockchain fintech area. I've seen it. It's my first visit to Davos, and I see that the half of the promenade is crowded with people from the fintech and crypto area, and I'm really surprised because I'm actually working in a conventional bank, traditional banking area, and this is something new to me. But the question is, because Kaspar always wants the clear and straightforward question. So the question is, because you're familiar with the with Caspian region, with CIS, in the commodity trade business, and now linked with the financial innovation, what is needed in our region in order to make the commodity trading more efficient?
I would say, guys, you know, it's the same as to us. Let me start with myself to make sure that it's a tangible example. When you have a marketplace, what is number one reason marketplaces die? They do not have a critical mass, right? Because you need to have the buyers and the sellers, right, in order to create the ecosystem. So you could fail at multiple different things, but if people are trying to put up, you learn from their behavior, you adjust, you can constantly progress, right? So I think the key issue is the critical mass and creating the trust. So if I were the government at this point, I would try to deregulate absolutely everything possible to the point where you cannot be hit by the international community, right? So you follow the basic things, such as anti-laundering and so on, and you allow everything to be developed, right? And you say, guys, come on in, do whatever you want to, let's see how this thing will develop, right? And that allows you to create the critical mass of the ecosystem, and it's not just about the commodity, online marketplaces, but it's about absolutely everything else. And think from the point of view of the talent in the region, right? In terms of in the crypto space and the blockchain technology, the number of the very intelligent people behind who come from the region is very significant, right? And so the question is, how can you make the regulations the least that people won't stay there and try to do the business, right? Okay. And I think that would be my
Kairat?
Can I add? Yes.
You represent the
Boris said very interesting thing, because, for example, in terms of regulation of crypto assets and ICOs, etc., we are now developing this regulation, and but we just like debating how to manage this, how to control after. Okay, we develop a regulatory, but then 1,000 of ICO come to our platform and starting to issue a different token, etc. How to manage all this like pipeline of this project, right? So we are limited with
what
people.
You can do, yeah.
So, and one of the solution is what Boris told is let the market manage it. Like build an association in partnership with us, etc., and let the community of professionals make this analysis, who to approve, who not, and how to make follow-up of this. And I think it is very much like working system, working solution. So we will try to do this. Thank you.
Ecosystem makes a huge thing. You brought up, you don't know who went to Harvard, for example. I went to Harvard Business School. You don't need blockchain to check there. It's very simple. You go to my LinkedIn, and because you have, I don't know, 150 different connections, you can clearly testify there, right? So the ecosystem with the ties between each other creates that.
Perfect. I would like to take one last question from somebody from the region, somebody from the Caspian region. Please, way in the back. We have, Mike.
Thank you very much. My name is Rufat Ibrahimov. I'm from Integral Petroleum. So I have a question to Kairat, to you. As far as I know, and you are aware about that in the Istanbul and the government of the Prime Minister of Turkey, they have announced in 2002 the creation of Istanbul International Financial Center. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to compete with this financial center? And the question is, why the company, I mean, because you understand that the issue there is the deeper and wider, broader, the liquidity level of and the technologies to be used in Istanbul International Financial Center. So how are you going to compete with them when the company from Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, or wherever in the region is going to be listed or to use their platform, not rather use your platform? What would be your comparative advantages? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for question. I can say that some of markets like we have to share, but some of them are like have an option to go to maybe Frankfurt, New York, or London Stock Exchange, or find out a new solution nearby, like in neighbor country. We will try to compete. I know that Turkish Stock Exchange is running for several years and has very big advantages. But I can say that Nasdaq, which is operated, Turkish Stock Exchange operated on Nasdaq too, right? Yeah. Yeah, so Nasdaq, which is like knows very much all this market and region, went to equity to our stock exchange too, and embroiled the technology. And from the other side, we are working with Chinese stock exchange, with own part of stock exchange too, and they are going to bring liquidity. So, and I think that in our region, liquidity is a very big issue, and we are trying to solve this. And we are going to privatize. So we are now our government is making a privatization, and we are going to make an IPO of national-owned companies in our stock exchange. And I think it brings a lot of tools and like things to trade. So I can say we are competing with like Turkish stock exchange. We're just making our business, and let's see how we will share this like question of regions.
But okay? I think as we learned this morning, I mean, in the digital space, you can increase the pie for all. So it's no longer only the physical component, you know, which struggle for a piece of the pie. Yeah. We can increase it substantially. Yeah. And I think also from the Istanbul side, obviously you are at the Bosporus, and Nexus East-West, really more towards to the West. I mean, how much of export goes into Europe? Huh?
Yeah.
A lot? How much is a lot? How many % of total export go to Europe? Huh? Yeah, Turkish export. Over 60% go into Europe. How many go into Europe from Kazakhstan? I would say 20, 30.
Yeah, probably.
So it's totally Russia, opposite. So you're more towards geared to Asia, while you're more towards geared to East. I think there's a coexistence in the system here. And there's also a language thing. I mean, yes, you might put everything digital and in English, but at the end, you know, the devil is in the details. This interpersonal relationship, what Boris mentioned. I mean, if you don't have the personal relationships, no deal is going to happen. People will be at the key of any transaction going forward. Technology might facilitate it, but why should I deal with you instead of you? Price might be an issue, sure, it's an issue, but it's not the only issue. And liquidity is an issue. So you have the Chinese backers, that's a big bully here. I mean, that's a huge thing. I'm here talking about the world's largest nation providing, you know, pumping on liquidity, and they pump it in where they want to pump it in. You better be friendly with these guys.
Yeah. But, and
I mean, I don't know how much liquid the Europeans are going to pump into the Bosporus. Huh? And well, you know, how much longer they can pump is another question. They do. Correct. So it's very interesting question. I would like to conclude here this panel. It was an extremely interesting, highly relevant for the... So it looks a really great future, I have to say, and I'm very happy that you could come. We have 70% of 3, it's a big statistics here, represented from that's the highest amount ever. And I tried to, you cannot believe how long I tried to attract people from the region. The ones who want to come have nothing to say. The ones who have something to say, they don't want to come. So it is a really conflict that I have all the time. So you have something to say and you wanted to come. And you did come. Yeah. I'm really proud. Yeah, please, Timur, briefly. 1 minute. 1 minute, Timur from Kazakhstan, of course.
The thing is, you said like Istanbul and our region. I mean, of course, Istanbul is focused on the Turkish market and the Caucasian region, yeah? But I think Astana will cover the Central Asian region and the former post-Soviet countries due to the language, actually, because everyone in Kazakhstan speaks Russian and everyone in other post-Soviet countries speak Russian. So due to that, I think we have a bit, compared with Turkish market, we have an advantage in our region. But it's about the value add that we want to add to our market. We want to create a marketplace where international firms that had no access to our market will become smooth access, and our firms. The main goal is actually to enable the inbound business and the outbound business, and whether it's banking, whether it's fintech, whether it's commodity trading, it is and simultaneously we have also the privatization wave. Over the next 3 to 5 years, Kazakhstan wants to privatize at least half of the state-owned enterprises. So we need the help and assistance of international players who are familiar with this kind of business. And we invite them, not only the regional ones, but we invite international ones. Yeah. And those who have cooperated and provided their services to our market will have a better access to our market. We will provide the infrastructure, we will provide a common ground, we will provide the fundamentals, the legal framework and the regulatory framework.
Kaspar, one more add-on, please. Also, Turkish stock exchange breached with our old stock exchange a couple of years before, as you know, maybe. Yeah, with Kasa, exactly. So why can't we, like, in the future, breach it with our new stock exchange? And it's based on NASDAQ and technology on your bridge now. Yeah, I think it will be easier. So
it will be a logic, the chain, that build back the Silk Road, which makes a harmonization across the whole East-West corridor. I would like to conclude the strategies and tactics leveraging digital technology across the Caspian region. I try to summarize. From Kairat's side, we build an ecosystem to deploy best-in-class financial technologies to build a regional leading marketplace. While Pierre Code will be the law in cyberspace, which will bring down the wall for transactions. And Boris, smart contracts are not that smart, so we have to be practical to make business easier. Deregulate as much as possible and let the market regulate itself. Thank you so much for coming all the way from Kazakhstan, from the Caspian region, and from Zurich. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.